Taking us back to our roots, we've been restoring this very, very special Jaguar D-Type over the last 18 months. Now, this is one of only a handful of cars built in 1954 and is effectively a prototype car. So much so that its chassis number is in fact XKC404, like a D-Type, which was later altered to XKD404. It's more commonly referred to as OKV3, which of course was the registration number it's worn for its whole life. Not only was it one of the trio of factory cars that gave the D-Type its race debut at the 1954 Le Mans 24 Hours, but it also scored the very first victory for a D-Type when it won that year's Reims 12 Hours. OKV3 was driven by Peter Whitehead and Ken Wharton at Le Mans, while OKV1 was entrusted to Tony Rolls and Duncan Hamilton, and OKV2 to Stirling Moss and Peter Walker. All three D-Types were struck by fuel feed problems early in the race, but late on Saturday evening, Peter Whitehead was once again circulating quickly in OKV3 and worked his way up into third place. The D-Type then moved into second behind the Ferrari 375 Plus of Gonzalez and Trintignant. But frustratingly, OKV retired with gearbox failure on Sunday morning and the Ferrari took the victory. Later that year, Norman Dewis drove OKV3 in the Brighton Speed Trials. Peter Walker took it to Prescott Hill Climb, and in November, Jaguar used it at a test day at Goodwood to evaluate drivers for the following season. After being displayed at the Brussels Motor Show in early 1955, OKV3 reappeared at Silverstone in May for the Daily Express meeting. Mike Hawthorne set a new lap record, and it was leading comfortably until a water pipe failed. He crossed the line in fourth. In August 1955, OKV3 was lent to Hamilton and Rolt for the Goodwood 9 Hours, but they were in early retirement with distributor failure, and that turned out to be its final race whilst it was owned by the Jaguar factory. Over the years, since it finished its remarkable race career with Jaguar, it's been owned by very few owners and actually remains as a truly very original D-Type, and of the handful of prototype cars built in '54, we deem it to be one of the most original and best cars there is. And this has been proved by what we've found during our restoration, because it's been left largely untouched over the years. And so the process we've gone through has been an extremely sensitive and delicate and highly researched process. And we're absolutely over the moon with the way it's turned out. And the next stage is for it to go to the paint shop. But before we did that, I just wanted to walk around the car and explain to people a little bit better why indeed this is so special. But going back to its original history, this is actually a truly historic car because it's the very first D-Type to win a race. And in '54, it won the Reims 12 Hour overall. And it was the first D-Type to win a race. The fundamental concept of Malcolm Sayers' design was this aluminium tub or cockpit. And it was built very much like an aircraft of the time. And this was revolutionary in the car world. It was all aluminium riveted together to make this central monocoque system. And then, as we head under the bonnet, these early cars differ from the later cars by having, again, an all-aluminium box section front chassis structure. Now, on later cars, they obviously realised after the first year that this was too susceptible to damage during an accident or during a race and needed to be interchanged, otherwise the car was too easily written off. So on later cars, these are a fully removable steel item bolted to the front bulkhead. But on this car, it's aluminium, so it's lighter weight, and it goes all the way through the car, and the actual monocoque is made around this frame, which is why it makes it so difficult to change it if it was bent or damaged. So there are only a handful of cars that survive today that are of this setup, and it was the '54 car. So they are very different under the front, lots of different features, and as already mentioned, originally this was labelled XKC404 and then changed to XKD404. But what we've done here is we've absolutely gone through the car by hand and meticulously restored it, trying to make sure that we don't replace any metalwork unnecessarily. So as much panel work's been retained. The bonnet in terms of its originality, all the original inner panels where we can, the front frame on the front of the bonnet is original. We've had to replace the inner wheel arches where they had been modified over a period of time, but we've made sure they're absolutely detail correct to the period photographs that are available, right down to the number of rivets and the positioning of the rivets and the way in which they're assembled and folded up. But the bonnet itself is largely original, minimal metalwork replaced during the restoration. The car's got this lovely sort of original and patinated feeling to it, and when it's painted, it's going to retain that. It's going to feel so correct and as it was and the life that it's lived, but still have a very show-ready feeling to it, just with those imperfections of a race car, as it should do. So whilst we've been restoring the car and preparing it for paint, we've attended to all the individual panels and we've stripped everything back by hand. And it's been really interesting to look at research photos, look at the car itself and try and establish exactly what areas were painted in period, what was left bare, and how they assembled and fitted together, right down to where the handbrake should be, which would be moved probably for passenger comfort later on. And on these interior panels, it's great to see all these original 404 numbers, which prove and show how original the car is. We've not replaced any of those. They are absolutely the panels that this car ran with at Le Mans in '54. And with that, there are some small details which took some time for us to get our head around, but we worked it out in terms of the passenger cockpit panel we determined was hinged and screwed shut. So it wasn't a pull a catch and remove it, it was actually a hinged item. And we figured that so that they could get in there, have a look at the electrics and if they needed to and repair them, but fix it in place and not have the worry of it coming loose or getting lost. And another thing that was interesting is we noticed a split in the Perspex surround and we couldn't quite work out what the faint shadow in some of the photos was for the mirror. And then we realized it was obviously for a driver to be able to reach out and dip the mirror at night so he wasn't being glared by the headlights of the cars behind. And as I've already mentioned, what's been really important to us on this car is to make sure that we don't over-restore the car. We've tidied things up, we've fixed things, but we haven't made the car too perfect. And when we've been doing our research and looking at other cars, it's clear to see that in the past, probably 20 years ago when the cars were restored, unfortunately this car avoided being restored, panels have been replaced because the aluminium, where it's so raw and so on show, was untidy. So we've had the limited opportunity to be able to actually retain that. And even when you look in the boot here, where we've done so much work, it's still quite rough and ready, but it's as good as it would have been when it's new, and it's absolutely as it would have been when it's new. So we are thrilled and over the moon with the way it's gone so far, and we cannot wait to get this into colour and return it to its British racing green, as all Works Jaguar D-types should be.